The paradox of the mind. Imagine waking up in a world where, instead of being guided by your own decisions, you are constantly commanded by a voice that never stops. It speaks all the time. Sometimes it shouts, other times it murmurs, but it's always there, whispering about what to do, what not to do, what is valuable and what is useless. When you breathe, it's there. When you smile, it watches. When you find yourself alone with your thoughts, that voice fills the void like a shadow that doesn't let you breathe fully. Have you ever stopped to question who the true commander of your mind is? Or do you believe that it's you who controls this endless whirlwind of thoughts, judgments, and anxieties? The mind, this powerful tool that should be an ally, has become a master, and you, the puppet. But what happens when you realize you are no longer the owner of this mind? What happens when, instead of being the captain of your own life, you are enslaved by an army of uncontrollable thoughts? It seems unimaginable, doesn't it? How could we live without the constant vigilance of our minds? Wouldn't it be the mind that keeps us alert, that helps us make decisions, that allows us to navigate this thing called life? But what if the truth is different? What if the mind, instead of being an alley, is a disguised prison? And what if, instead of guiding us, it is constantly distracting us, pulling us toward a hypothetical future or a distant memory? Are we really living, or are we merely existing under the command of a mind that never stops talking? Now imagine for a moment that you could turn off this constant flow of thoughts, not for a second, but for an extended period. Imagine being able to silence this internal voice that, in its ceaseless occupation, drags your attention from one place to another, preventing you from experiencing life around you. What would happen if you were no longer a slave to your mind? If you were able to perceive the deep silence that resides between your thoughts? How would it feel to live free from this whirlwind? The answer undoubtedly sounds paradoxical. You might feel empty without your thoughts, as though you've lost something essential, but at the same time, you would discover a freedom that you never imagined could exist. No longer a prisoner of your own thoughts, but finally able to be the calm observer of your own mind instead of being dragged by it. But how did we get to this point? How did we go from spontaneous beings attentive to the present to prisoners of our own minds, trapped by the voice that continuously writes our stories? What is it that steals our freedom to live in the now? And most importantly, can we truly escape this mental prison? These are the questions that lead us into an existential abyss, a disturbing paradox. We spend our lives seeking more, wanting more control, more success, more certainties, but it is exactly this incessant search that keeps us trapped. What if, instead of this, the true freedom lay in thinking less and living more? What happens when you begin to realize that the mind, with all its power, is not a guide, but a tool? A tool that, if used properly, can help, but when it becomes the master, it imprisons you in an endless cycle of anxiety and distraction. The mind should be your servant, not your master. Now imagine that you start challenging this dynamic, that you refuse to follow the constant commands of the mind and instead decide to listen to the silence that exists between your thoughts. What would happen if you finally gave yourself permission to stop trying to control life and simply let it unfold? How would your reality change if, instead of always being lost in the past or projecting into the future, you could inhabit the present with complete attention, without the interference of the mind? This is the great paradox of our existence. The mind, which should be our ally, has become our prison. But the key to this prison is not in fighting it, but in understanding that it is not who we are. It is merely a tool, an instrument to be used when needed. When it stops being our servant and becomes our master is when we start to lose our freedom. The hidden problem, the mind as prisoner. The human condition, from the moment we are born, is marked by a deep conditioning, a belief that the mind is our ruler, the source of our identity, and the key to navigating the world. It's in the way we are taught to think, solve problems, and value intellectual prowess. From childhood, we are trained to believe that success, happiness, and fulfillment all depend on the mind. But what if this belief is the root of the very problem we face today? What if our mind, instead of being our servant, has become the prison we live in? We have been conditioned by society, family, and culture to elevate the mind, to define our self-worth by how sharp, intelligent, and rational we are. Success is measured by mental productivity, quick thinking, memorization, the ability to solve problems, all of which are praised from an early age. But in this constant pursuit of mental efficiency, we lose something crucial: the awareness of the present moment. We lose touch with the real us, the person who experiences life directly, unfiltered by the incessant commentary of the mind. Eckhart Tolle speaks extensively about this. He explains that when we are not conscious of the mind, when we do not observe it as a separate entity, we become trapped in its narratives. The mind generates thoughts at a rapid pace, and we begin to believe these thoughts are who we are. The more we identify with them, the less we are able to experience the simplicity and stillness of being. Our thoughts take the driver's seat, dictating our every move, leaving us in a perpetual state of worry, doubt, and fear. The mind becomes an uncontrollable force, dictating how we feel and act, but it was never meant to be our master. It is simply a tool, an instrument to help us interact with the world. But when the mind starts controlling us, the tool becomes the tyrant. We become obsessed with the future, consumed by the past, and overwhelmed by the constant stream of thoughts that flood our consciousness. In this state, we lose touch with the present moment, the only place where life truly exists. This is the hidden problem. We are not taught to recognize that we are not our thoughts. We become slaves to our mind, trapped in a cycle of mental activity that prevents us from living freely. The more we try to control our thoughts, the more we empower them. It is only when we step back and observe the mind without attachment that we can begin to regain control. The great philosopher Wu Xin puts it simply: the mind is like a mirror that reflects reality, but it is not reality itself. It distorts, filters, and amplifies everything it perceives. We look into the mirror of the mind and think it shows us who we are, but in reality, it is just a reflection of fragmented thoughts and external influences. These reflections create a distorted view of ourselves, one that is rooted in fear, anxiety, and constant striving. The deeper we get into this illusion, the further we move from our true nature. The mind is not who you are. When you become aware of this, when you recognize that the mind is simply a tool, a powerful one, yes, but a tool nonetheless, you begin to see through its tricks. You stop identifying with its endless chatter, and you start to realize that you are the observer, the silent witness to it all. This realization marks the beginning of the journey toward freedom. It is a journey that requires letting go of the need to control, to analyze, to judge. It involves stepping back and simply observing. And in that observation, we find the space to experience life directly, without the filters and distortions of the mind. The invisible consequences, the mind's silent influence. Now, we must take a moment to consider the profound effects of this invisible influence that the mind has over our lives. It is easy to overlook the way the mind silently shapes our personal experiences and societal structures. We think of it as a tool to solve problems, but we fail to realize how it distorts our perception of reality and creates unnecessary suffering. The first consequence of living under the control of the mind is the impact on our relationships. Instead of connecting with others in an authentic, open way, we interact based on judgments, assumptions, and projections. We judge others not as they are, but through the lens of our own thoughts and past experiences. If we feel insecure, the mind tells us that others are judging us too. If we feel hurt, the mind reinforces that the other person has wronged us. We see everything through the filter of our thoughts, which creates a wall between us and the people around us. In the workplace, this constant mental chatter becomes even more destructive. We are driven by the need to achieve, to compete, to constantly prove our worth. We measure our success by external standards, forgetting that true fulfillment comes from within. The mind tricks us into believing that we must achieve more, do more, and be more to feel valuable. But this never-ending pursuit of more leaves us feeling empty and disconnected. We are so focused on the external rewards that we forget to stop and appreciate the present moment. This societal obsession with productivity, success, and control has serious consequences. We are taught to measure our self-worth by our achievements, by how much we can accomplish. But this mindset leads to a lack of fulfillment, as we are never truly present. We are always looking ahead, striving for something that feels just out of reach. The constant need to do prevents us from simply being. Eckhart Tolle often speaks about how the mind drives us to seek happiness in the future. I'll be happy when I achieve this, or when I get that. But true happiness is not a destination. It is a state of being that arises when we are fully present in the moment. Happiness is not something to achieve. It is something to experience in the now. When we are identified with the mind, we become trapped in a cycle of craving and dissatisfaction. Our thoughts tell us that we need more to be happy, but that more is always elusive. As soon as we get what we thought we wanted, the mind tells us that we need something else. And so we continue to chase after fleeting moments of satisfaction without ever finding lasting peace. This cycle not only affects us individually, but it also shapes the culture we live in. Society values constant activity, achievement, and success. We are taught to strive, to compete, to never stop moving. But this creates a culture of stress, anxiety, and burnout. People are constantly running on the treadmill of more, never stopping to question if it's really necessary. The consequences of this mind-driven existence are not only personal, but collective. We live in a world where people are disconnected from themselves and from one another. We are so focused on achieving external goals that we fail to recognize the importance of inner peace, connection, and presence. The rebellion. How to break free. So, how do we break free from this cycle? How do we escape the endless chatter of the mind and reclaim our lives? The solution is radical, but it is simple. We must stop identifying with the mind and start observing it. The first step is to become aware of the mind's influence. Eckhart Tolle teaches us that true freedom begins when we recognize that we are not our thoughts. We are the awareness that observes them. The key to breaking free is not in fighting the mind or trying to suppress it, but in simply observing it without attachment. When we observe our thoughts without judgment or identification, we start to see them for what they are, just thoughts. They are not us. They are not truths. They are just fleeting mental events that come and go. We do not need to believe everything the mind tells us. We do not need to act on every impulse, every emotion, or every thought. This process of observing the mind without attachment creates space. It allows us to separate from the constant flow of thoughts and enter into the present moment. In this space, we find our true selves, a self that is not defined by the mind, but by the stillness and presence within. The practice of mindfulness is one of the most effective ways to break free from the mind. Mindfulness involves paying attention to the present moment without judgment or distraction. By focusing on the breath, bodily sensations, or the sounds around us, we begin to train our minds to be still. This practice helps us recognize when we are being pulled into the past or the future and gently brings us back to the present. But mindfulness is just the beginning. The true freedom comes when we realize that we can choose to live from a place of awareness rather than from the constant stream of thoughts. We stop letting the mind control us and begin to live from a deeper, more authentic place. This shift in perspective is a radical change. It's not about doing more or achieving more, it's about being more, being present, being aware, and being true to yourself in every moment. When you stop identifying with your thoughts, you start living more fully. You stop chasing after external rewards and begin to find peace and fulfillment in the present moment. The final truth, the most powerful realization. The ultimate realization, the one that sets you free, is this: you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that observes them. Once you fully understand this, you realize that you are much more than the mental narrative that your mind creates. You are the stillness, the space, the consciousness behind the thoughts. This is the most powerful realization you can have. It changes everything. When you no longer identify with your thoughts, you are no longer a prisoner of them. You no longer have to fight against them or control them. You simply observe them and let them pass. In this space of non-identification, you discover true freedom. When you begin to live from this place of awareness, everything changes. You experience life directly, without the filters of the mind. You become present, fully alive in each moment, free from the constant pull of past memories or future anxieties. Life becomes more vivid, more real, and more beautiful. The mind is no longer your master. It is your tool, your servant, and you are the one who decides when to use it. You stop being controlled by thoughts and start living from a place of peace and presence. You begin to experience life as it truly is, not as the mind distorts it to be. This shift in perspective is not a one-time event. It is an ongoing practice, a way of living. But as you begin to experience life from this deeper place, you will find that everything becomes easier, lighter, and more joyful. The need to chase after success, approval, and validation fades away. You start living for yourself, not for anyone else. The greatest paradox is that true freedom comes not from controlling the mind, but from letting go of the need to control it. When you stop trying to fight against your thoughts and simply observe them, you find that they no longer have the power to control you. And in this freedom, you begin to live more fully, think less, and experience the joy of being. The final message is simple, yet profound. Think less, live more. When the mind stops being your master and becomes your servant, you open yourself up to a life of true freedom and fulfillment. You no longer have to chase after external goals or worry about what others think. You simply live, fully present in the moment. Now, it's your turn. If you're ready to take the next step to begin living more fully and thinking less, join us on this journey. Subscribe for more content that will help you on your path to freedom. Start observing your mind and begin your transformation today.